All right, great. Thank you for taking some time today to spend with both myself and my colleague, Rusik. We're going to talk you through the future of your VMware-based workloads on AWS. This is a 100-level session. There is a deeper dive session on the Amazon Elastic VMware Service, or EVS, today in the Mandalay Bay here at 2:30 p.m. The session code is MAM103. So Rusik and I will be around to do Q&A for a little while after the session. You can come up and chat with us, but I know a number of folks in here will want to go deeper on EVS, and I just want to make sure you can grab that session code so that you can go to that session and get some of those questions answered, where we have a lot more time allocated, and we're also going to be presenting with the service team on EVS. So today we're going to walk through what we're hearing from customers as they're looking at their VMware strategy, the different pathways that they're looking at to bring those workloads into the cloud, how customers are migrating, optimizing, and modernizing their workloads on AWS. My name is Sean Lewis. I'm the Director of Enterprise Applications, Migration, and Modernization in our Worldwide Specialist Organization, and my colleague Rusik here leads our migration programs. Okay. So what are we seeing and hearing from customers? A couple of signals that we've seen analyst firms gathering, and of course, we're out talking to customers and hearing this feedback as well. The first is that many customers, 74%, according to Gartner, are looking at alternatives to their VMware environment today. That could be taking VMware workloads to the cloud. That could be containerizing those workloads, rehosting those workloads somewhere else, looking at different alternatives. They're looking at that strategy at the infrastructure layer and saying, well, what do I want that to look like in 3 years or 5 years? This is a good opportunity for me to reevaluate those things. And we're also hearing that 95% of net new workloads are just going to be built on cloud-native platforms by next year. So the primary focal point here for many of our customers has been the existing on-premises estate and the workloads that they have today that are running with VMware and what to do about them. So as we work with customers, over the last year or so, and they're talking about these different alternatives and what they're doing and looking at for their VMware workloads, one of the things that we've heard consistently is that customers are not necessarily looking at a one-size-fits-all approach for this migration, this rehost, whatever you may want to call it, right? Refactor, re-architect. There are multiple pathways. And so, one of the things that we've done is we've built our go-to-market here to help customers is embrace a long-standing AWS tenet and a core part of our philosophy around give customers choice, right? Customers value flexibility. We want to make sure that you have these different pathways available to you, and we can help you kind of guide you prescriptively based on our experience on where we can make recommendations for you to leverage these different pathways for your environment. So we've been engaging in a number of assessments with customers where we look at their estate. We'll talk about how to assess the estate a little bit later with the Optimization and Licensing Assessment Program, or OLA. And then help kind of make some recommendations on where the different workloads could go based on what your requirements, constraints, and goals are. So a couple of the patterns that we see customers looking at for their VMware workloads, and I'll kind of walk through these. The first one is relocate, and this is now removed from embargo and unveiled as of Matt's keynote. And we did a pre-announced blog last week with the Amazon Elastic VMware Service, or EVS. EVS allows you to take your VCF subscription from Broadcom and run it in the cloud with AWS. EVS is built on top of AWS primitives like EC2 and EBS for compute and storage. It allows you to orchestrate those things to create the environment that you need for your VMware workloads and relocate them into AWS. The second is rehost. So we see customers looking at EC2 as a destination for workloads and saying, is this an opportunity to take these VMs and rehost them into EC2, optimize and right-size them for the right type of compute, instance type and family, and then bring them into EC2. Containerization, as I mentioned. A lot of cool announcements this week about our application modernization and container strategy. Been talking to a lot of customers this week about EKS hybrid. A lot of interest there. We're looking at customers' container strategy with them and saying is now maybe an opportunity to take workloads from on-premises and containerize them, if that makes sense. Replatforming to managed services, things like RDS, FSX, removing some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting in your environment where AWS could provide a managed experience for you to take care of things like patching, elasticity, auto-scaling, and security. And finally, refactoring. We're working with a number of customers to actually rebuild monolithic applications and refactor them into cloud native, perhaps using technologies like serverless with Lambda. At AWS in professional services, we have a team called AML, the Application Modernization Lab. They work with customers to break down monolithic apps, rebuild them from scratch with cloud native services, hand them back to the customer to run some production traffic through, and show that customer the improved performance, resilience, security, and overall efficacy of a workload leveraging cloud native. Really cool announcements this week as well around Q, including the ability to transform code .NET to .NET Core. Huge game changer here. Take .NET Core code that's been compiled, run on Graviton, lower the carbon footprint impact of the instance, and improve price performance. So we've also seen customer pacing be a topic that's come up a lot over the last year. And we see customers that are really kind of falling into roughly these two groups. There might be some outliers, but these are the kind of the primary ones that we're noticing in terms of patterns. The first is customers that are really focused on speed and they want to get migration going quickly, migrate into AWS quickly, lift and shift to maybe get out of a data center or a co-location facility with a compelling event to do so with maybe a time-bound event, and then optimizing those workloads as they migrate in. Using Compute Optimizer, using Trusted Advisor, using our Cost Optimization Hub, using Optimized CPU from AWS. If you've never checked that out, I highly recommend it. The ability for you to control how many vCPUs you actually have deployed in an AWS instance. If you have software, for example, that relies on per CPU core or thread licensing, the ability to control that with optimized CPU is very cool. And then the second bucket are customers that are really transforming workloads, and migration speed is not their top priority. Their top priority is actually modernizing the workload, getting it in the state that they want it to be in, perhaps as they're migrating in or before they migrate in, and then they're lifting and shifting it over. An example here could be containerizing a workload on premises using something like EKS hybrid and then moving it into AWS later. So when we look at the kind of technology mapping, right, to some of these different patterns and say, what are the services that customers are using to make these different migrations happen? We've kind of built a stack here that moves up in terms of the cloud native benefits and ROI on the left. And again, we start at the base level with relocate with EVS, right? Just taking those VMware workloads and moving them into the cloud. A great benefit of EVS is all that VMware compatibility is there for you with VCF 5.2. So you can use HCX to migrate these workloads in using EVS, and then you can go through and leverage all of your management and reporting and tooling and orchestration that you're familiar with VMware. If you have ISV applications that are certified to run in VMware, you now have the ability with EVS to continue to run those. If you have IP addressing in your existing VMware environment that maybe you don't want to redo and deal with, EVS is a great relocation option. Rehost with EC2, we talked about this, right? Like over 650 different instance type and family permutations with EC2. Many great opportunities for you to right size and really get exactly where you want to go with the right EC2 instance for your workload. Containerizing with ECS and EKS, really strong container story that just keeps getting stronger with greater management capability or performance capability for customers. And then, of course, managed services, whether that be RDS or whether that be FSX or some of the other services that I mentioned. And then finally, the refactor path. On the right, you can see we have some different on-premises options in the form of outposts. So some customers have latency sensitive workloads or compliance requirements, data residency requirements, where they must keep a workload in a particular physical location, where AWS does not have a region availability zone, local zone available to them. Outposts is a great option for you to consider there, where you get the benefit of AWS in terms of the services that we have already talked about today, like our container services, our managed services like our relational database service, or EC2, managed by AWS, accessible and controllable via your AWS console, but on physical hardware that lives in a data center or physical location of your choice. So as you're doing that assessment of your workloads and saying there are a subset of these workloads for regulatory reasons or other reasons that need to stay on-prem, AWS has you covered with Outposts. And then at the bottom of the slide, we also are seeing ISVs really leaning in with different offerings to support customers as they look at their VMware migration pathway options. One is Nutanix. Nutanix offers the NC2 offering, which is Nutanix able to be run, provisioned, and procured via the AWS Marketplace on top of AWS. The second is Red Hat OpenShift service for AWS, or ROSA, which is available through IBM's Red Hat offerings in the AWS Marketplace as well. So if you have OpenShift on premises and you're looking for an opportunity to move that into AWS, there's the ROSA pathway available. Okay, so just a little bit more on EVS. As I mentioned, MAM119 at 2:30, we'll be going a lot deeper in an exclusive session just on EVS. EVS was designed jointly between AWS and Broadcom based on customer feedback, where customers told us, I need that core VMware VCF capability, and I want it in AWS. I want the elasticity, I want the resilience, I want the high availability and the performance of AWS infrastructure, and I want to pair that up with my Broadcom VMware VCF strategy. So this is a much simpler and faster way through that relocate pattern to get your VMware workloads into the cloud with AWS. You control and manage and own the VMware environment in AWS. You bring your VCF subscription that you've procured directly through Broadcom or through a reseller and bring it into AWS and run it that way. This is, since it's using the AWS primitives like compute and storage, something that you can provision and deploy and operate in your own AWS account yourself. We also are going to have managed service partners at general availability who will be able to offer MSP capabilities for EVS. So if you'd like to have a partner manage your VMware environment, there'll be partners available in the ecosystem to do that. There'll also be a one hand on the wheel kind of an option where you can manage some of it and a partner can manage some of it depending on what your flexibility and what your requirements are. And then of course, the pace of innovation and the rapid acceleration of new capabilities coming into AWS. We're committed to partnering with Broadcom to bring better price performance, new instance types and families, other things into the platform over time so that we can continue to create the best VMware experience in the cloud for customers with EVS. Here's an architectural diagram of what EVS looks like. It's fairly straightforward here. So you see we have a vSphere-based environment that would live on premises with your vSAN and your NSX components. And then migrating into an AWS region, you can see with EVS, we've got our SDDC manager and then all of the core capabilities of the VCF stack running in EVS, and then tight integration and orchestration with all of the other AWS services that you use and familiar with. Again, this is core AWS technology under the hood that you'll be able to use and manage in conjunction with your VMware environment. So I touched briefly on some of the partner offerings just to go a little bit deeper. So with ROSA, they do offer a fully managed application platform with ROSA on AWS. So if you are a IBM Red Hat customer and you're using OpenShift and you haven't checked that out, definitely take a look. We just announced a new strategic collaboration agreement this week at reInvent with IBM Red Hat, so we're really excited about the partnership there. And then Nutanix, where we've signed a similar agreement, strategic collaboration agreement with Nutanix, and know that there are many Nutanix customers or prospective customers that are looking forward to taking advantage of the Nutanix infrastructure, virtualization and management capabilities running in AWS with NC2. And again, both of these offerings are available on the marketplace today. Okay, now I'm going to turn the session over to Rusik, who's going to talk through some of the migration tooling and programs that we have available to help you get started. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everybody. So as Sean mentioned, this is going to be a complex journey for migrating and modernizing these workloads. There's a bunch of areas where you or your end customers are likely to need help, and AWS and our partners have offerings in each of those categories. And I'll start by talking about purpose-built migration services like Queue Developer. You've heard a lot about that this week. AWS Application Migration Service. Ultimately, these services are about removing or substantially reducing the undifferentiated heavy lifting associated with these VMware migrations. AWS also offers an end-to-end guided experience with AWS Migration Hub, and of course, a wide range of third-party offerings from our partners and tools that support lots of different aspects of the VMware journey, which we'll talk a little bit about. But let's start with Queue Developer, a lot that you heard this week. The first Gen AI-powered assistant to help migrate and modernize VMware workloads. And Queue Developer is using an agentic-based approach for transformation. And this takes you across this journey from application dependency mapping, wave planning, all the way through to execution of the cutover of those resources onto EC2. Look, ultimately, this is about reducing time, about reducing cost, and helping you reinvest that in innovation. Queue Developer also, from a VMware-specific lens, does something particularly important. One aspect of VMware migrations that can be challenging is network translation. And this is where Queue Developer is using VMware-specific domain expert models to help do that mapping of your VMware-specific network configurations into their AWS cloud-native counterparts. And Queue Developer also is proactively prompting for user input. This allows you to kind of hit that right balance between automation and human oversight. And it has a new, rich, unified web experience as a front end. We think that's going to be right for most folks doing these VMware migrations, but it also integrates with popular IDEs for things like code recommendations and conversational capabilities. We're very excited about Queue Developer and what it can do to speed up these VMware migrations and ongoing modernizations. A service you may already know is AWS Application Migration Service, also known as MGN. This is Turbo Rehost. It's a highly automated rehost. And MGN allows you to cut over these VMs as is, but it also includes some built-in options for customization for lighter replatforms while you migrate. One thing that I think MGN's particularly good for is what I call a two-step or two-putt modernization. If you've got a large on-premise state of VMs, you need to cut that over. Maybe there's some time pressure to do so. MGN is great for that. And then a second step, follow-on modernization. Another tool that's an important part of the overall suite here is AWS Migration Hub. Think of this as your shared collaborative workspace for migration. It brings together multiple services and tools into one collaborative space. And that takes you through the whole gamut from discovery and assessment to planning and migration. And one important feature is that it also allows you to track the progress of individual or grouped applications for multiple parties to sort of see where you are on the process. Another feature that's pretty cool about Migration Hub is something called Migration Hub Journeys. And so these are pre-built templates. So when you're doing one of these migrations, when you really get down to the granular level, it could be hundreds of little sub-steps with dependencies on each other, with different people in the company, a partner, helping perform those. So this gives you like a single source of truth and a common checklist to execute against, and it now also includes VMware-specific templates for migration. And of course, we have a wide range of partner tools also available. I'll speak on this a little bit further, but one important point I want to foreground. AWS because of the importance of these migrations, is making these tools available for free or highly subsidized, depending on the size of the migration, with the logos that you see on the slide here, with more forthcoming soon. And you'll see these span the whole range of activities involved in these VMware migrations. I'll just name a few of them, but tools like those from CAST for discovery and assessment of your environment, tools like those from River Meadow to help accelerate the actual migration itself, and tools from great partners like Monty Cloud to help the ongoing management of those workloads. And you're going to see more logos on a version of the slide as we go forward. It's a really important way that we're helping support end customers and partners with these migrations. Now, we've been talking a lot about the technology aspects, but often, especially with VMware, there's a big people element as well. Maybe I have a bunch of folks who've been vSphere admins for a long time, and how are they going to become fluent in cloud? And for that, AWS has a range of training and certification offerings. Many of you are probably familiar with the general structure of these, but I'll highlight a couple. For those who want to go really deep, we have instructor-led classroom trainings. AWS Migration Essentials is probably the course, right, if you really want to have a boot camp type experience and get deep. But we also are offering on-demand digital trainings. A new one that I'd highlight is migrating VMware workloads to AWS. This is great, especially if you have distributed teams that can't all get to a classroom together, or they need to very quickly get up to speed because there's some urgency around a VMware migration. And so the people aspect here is super important, right? The skills in-house to be able to migrate, but also continue to manage these workloads once on AWS. So that's one aspect of the people side. There's also the support that most customers would be working with a partner or professional services to aid them on this journey. And as it relates to VMware, our AWS Professional Services org has been performing VMware migrations for a really long time. And in response to some of the increased interest in the current moment around this, they've packaged together a lot of their best practices and some of those standardized runbooks into a standardized rapid migration offer for VMware. There's a great case study that was just published last week from Danske Bank, working with AWS ProServe, cutting over 16,000 VMs 50% faster than their original timeline. So there's some great opportunities for automation and repeatability. And of course, our partners also have deep expertise in VMware and lots of aspects throughout that migration journey. We have AWS Migration Competency Certified partners everywhere in the globe. Lots of them have VMware-specific offerings out there in the market, or perform VMware migrations as part of their standard business as well. And these partners in the migration competency are also part of our MAP program, which I'll mention in a moment, which provides important incentives to help offset the costs of that professional services work. And I'll close here by talking a little bit about assessment and programs. Now, assessment is super important. On this next slide, take a QR snap of this code in the bottom here while I'm talking. Optimization and licensing assessments, or OLAs for short, we call them, are a really, really important tool. If you take nothing away from this entire session, I want you to take away that I should probably be doing an OLA. It is a no-cost assessment funded by AWS to help you understand what do you have on-prem or in an existing cloud environment. You learn about your actual resource utilization and, importantly, your licensing utilization, and it will provide you an output of quantified recommendations for cost savings. This is super important just to get lay of the land, but I've also seen that it's super important to get that internal buy-in and help people quantify what the business case should be. On average, we're seeing that customers doing these OLAs are finding an average of 43% cost savings potential. So some really eye-poppingly large numbers. Go do an OLA. And then many of you may also be familiar with Migration Acceleration Program, or MAP. This is our large-scale commercial framework and methodology for supporting customers and partners on the end-to-end migration journey. I'll talk about it at a high level, But the nuts and bolts of it are that MAP will support you with a methodology, with incentives, actual cash to partners to perform work, and tooling. We've now also included access to some of those tools that I mentioned a little bit earlier to help specifically with VMware. And we broadly think of MAP as supporting on a 3-phase journey: an assessment to understand a little bit more deeply what we have, a mobilize phase, which is about wave planning, landing zones as necessary, app dependency mapping at a deeper level, really getting granular, and then a migrate and modernize phase where we're actually moving workloads and then continuing on that modernization journey. Between OLA and MAP, you've got a really strong 1-2 punch where AWS is putting significant financial incentives behind helping you build an internal business case, access to partners around the world with the right competency who can then support you on that journey forward. And so I'll wrap up here. In addition to reminding everyone about the EVS session later here at Mandalay Bay at 2:30, my call to action is, assess what you've got. Do one of those OLA assessments. Help your stakeholders understand the size of the prize and really start to put some numbers behind it. Leverage these services and tools, Q Developer, Migration Hub, ISV tools that we're funding to help you on your journey. And then work with partners and/or AWS ProServe to build that plan and execute. There's a lot of opportunity here right now, and we're behind you to help you on that journey. Thank you so much, everybody.